Have you ever wondered how a single event could trigger a global catastrophe? Picture this. It's a sunny day in June 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary is visiting Sarajevo. Little does he know his life is about to be snuffed out, and with it, the peace of the entire world. His assassination set a chain of events into motion that would lead to the outbreak of World War I. At this time, a complex web of alliances had been spun across Europe. Each country was like a domino, ready to topple and bring the others down with it. The death of the Archduke was the push that started the dominoes falling. Nations began to take sides, alliances were called upon, and the drums of war started to beat. The political climate was a powder keg, and the assassination was the spark that lit the fuse. And so, with the pull of a trigger, the world was set on a path to war. In every war there are sides. In World War I, these were the Allies and the Central Powers. The stage was set for a global conflict, a clash of titans. The Allies, a formidable force consisting of powers like France, Russia and the United Kingdom, stood tall. Notable figures such as Georges Clemenceau of France, David Lloyd George of the United Kingdom and Tsar Nicholas II of Russia led their nations with an iron resolve. They were united by a common goal: to check the aggressive expansion of their adversaries, the Central Powers. On the other side of the coin were the Central Powers, a coalition dominated by Germany, Austria-Hungary and the Ottoman Empire. Commanded by leaders like Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany and Franz Joseph II of Austria-Hungary, they were driven by a desire for territorial expansion and a sense of nationalistic pride. Their objective was clear: to reshape the balance of power in Europe and beyond. These two alliances, each with a roster of countries and leaders, were not just distinguished by their geographical location or political alignment. They were also differentiated by their motivations and goals. The Allies sought to maintain the status quo, to preserve the balance of power, and to protect their colonies and spheres of influence. The Central Powers, on the other hand, were intent on challenging this balance, expanding their territories and increasing their influence. As the war raged on, these alliances would be tested and strained. Countries would switch sides, leaders would rise and fall, and motivations would evolve. But at the heart of it all were these two sides, the Allies and the Central Powers, each believing in their cause, each fighting for what they believed to be their rightful place in the world. And so the stage was set for one of the deadliest conflicts in human history, a stage where nations would clash, alliances would be tested, and the world would be forever changed. Two sides, each with their own objectives, locked in a deadly struggle. As the war progressed, the world witnessed a level of destruction and loss of life unlike anything before. It was a dark era, marked by significant battles and events that unfurled in a relentless sequence. The war's chronicle starts with the Battle of the Marne, where the German advance into France was halted, setting the stage for a 4-year deadlock. The infamous trench warfare then began, where soldiers lived and died in vast networks of dugouts, a grim testament to the stalemate on the Western Front. In the east, the Battle of Tannenberg saw the German forces deliver a crushing blow to Russia, highlighting the disparity in military preparedness between the two powers. The war also witnessed a revolution in the art of warfare. Technology took a devastating turn, introducing the world to a new era of mechanized combat. The stalemate of the trenches was met with an answer in the form of the tank, a steel beast that could traverse the muddy battlefield with ease. The skies, once the domain of birds, now buzzed with the sound of aircraft, their roles evolving from reconnaissance to bombing and dogfighting. Chemical warfare made its horrific debut, with chlorine and mustard gas leaving a trail of blinded, burned and suffocating victims. Submarines prowled the depths, their deadly torpedoes threatening any ship that dared cross the vast oceans. But all this innovation came at a terrible human cost. The sheer scale of casualties was staggering. Millions of men and women, from soldiers on the front lines to civilians caught in the crossfire, lost their lives. Each nation bled, their populations decimated, their landscapes scarred. The Battle of the Somme, Verdun and Passchendaele are etched in history as some of the bloodiest events of the war. their names synonymous with the senseless slaughter that characterized this global conflict. Through all this, the world watched in horror and disbelief. The old ways of warfare had been swept away, replaced by a chillingly efficient machine of destruction. In the midst of such carnage, the world held its breath. In 1917, the tides of war shifted with the entry of a new player, the United States. For 3 years, the United States had remained neutral, watching from across the Atlantic as Europe was engulfed in the flames of war. But by the spring of 1917, a series of incidents had begun to tilt American public opinion towards entering the fray. German submarines, or U-boats, had been sinking American and neutral ships without warning in the Atlantic and around the British Isles, a practice known as unrestricted submarine warfare. This, coupled with the interception of the infamous Zimmermann telegram, in which Germany promised Mexico territory in the United States if they allied against them, was enough to push the United States over the edge. President Woodrow Wilson asked Congress to declare war on Germany on April 2, 1917, stating that the world must be made safe for democracy. 4 days later, Congress obliged, and the United States officially entered the war on the side of the Allies. The US entry into the war was a game changer. Not only did it bring fresh troops and massive industrial output to the Allied cause, but it also provided a much-needed morale boost. The American Expeditionary Forces under General John J. Pershing arrived in France in June 1917. By the following year, over 1 million American soldiers, or doughboys as they were often called, were fighting on the Western Front. The United States also played a crucial role on the home front. American factories churned out war materials at an astonishing rate, supplying not only their own troops but also their beleaguered allies. This influx of supplies and manpower was a turning point, helping to tip the balance in favor of the Allies. In the end, the United States' involvement in World War I was decisive. Their entry into the war marked the beginning of the end for the Central Powers, who were unable to match the resources and resolve of the rejuvenated Allies. With the United States' entry, the end of the war was in sight. When the guns fell silent on November 11, 1918, the world was forever changed. The end of World War I brought more than just an end to the fighting. It brought an end to an era and the beginning of another. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in June 1919, officially brought the war to its conclusion. Yet it was a peace treaty that sowed the seeds of future conflict. The treaty imposed heavy reparations on Germany, reducing it to a state of economic despair. The country was also stripped of its colonies and military capabilities, and it was forced to accept full responsibility for the war, a clause known as the War Guilt Clause. But the impact of World War I extended far beyond Germany. Old empires crumbled while new nations emerged. The once mighty Russian, Ottoman, German, and Austro-Hungarian empires collapsed, making way for new nations to form, redrawing the map of the world. In the Middle East, the Sykes-Picot Agreement between Britain and France carved up the former Ottoman Empire into new territories, setting the stage for a century of conflicts. In Europe, the surge of nationalism that the war had ignited led to the creation of new states like Czechoslovakia and Yugoslavia, and in an attempt to prevent such a catastrophic war from happening again, the League of Nations was established. This international organization was designed to promote peace and resolve disputes through diplomacy, not war. Unfortunately, it was a noble idea that proved ineffective in the face of rising tensions and aggression in the following decades. World War I, the war to end all wars, ironically set the stage for an even more devastating global conflict. The harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles, the economic instability, and the nationalistic fervor it ignited all contributed to the grievances that would eventually lead to World War II. In the aftermath of World War I, the world was left to pick up the pieces and face the dawn of a new era. World War I, a conflict that changed the world. A war ignited by the complex entanglement of political alliances, militarism, nationalism, and a single act of violence, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand. This global conflict saw the world's great powers divided into two alliances, the Allies and the Central Powers, locked in a deadly struggle that spanned 4 continents. As the war raged, it brought about technological advancements in weaponry and strategic trench warfare, leading to an unprecedented number of casualties. The entry of the United States on the side of the Allies in 1917 significantly shifted the tide of the war. In the aftermath, the world was forever altered. Empires fell, national boundaries were redrawn, and in an attempt to prevent future conflicts, the League of Nations was established. Yet the harsh conditions of the Treaty of Versailles sowed the seeds for another global conflict. And so we remember World War I not just for its destruction, but for its lessons that still resonate today.